charm.
There you go.
Yeah, I completely spaced and forgot to change the title, I guess.
That's what edit's for, right?
Right? I edited it and it just didn't change it,
It
so
didn't change
whatever,
it?
I
Oh,
guess. Yeah. Do. Hey, how's it going, Blazing Trees? I'm gonna go ahead and send you a link too, by the way, so you can share it out if you want.
all right.
Sorry, give us a moment. A little scuffed. Do. All right, go ahead and post. Alexa just started talking, so the puppy is barking now.
I can't hear any of it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, no.
So I could hear last time a little bit.
Oh, could you?
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed microphone I have does a good job of cutting out the background noise as well.
Mm-hmm. Which I think I might have actually enabled something to try to cut background noise. So that could possibly it. Ground fog, how's it going? Sorry, I'm just getting this posted out to the platforms.
Sit it out.
What have you been up to today? You just working or what?
Yeah, working. Was done with clients, around lunchtime this morning, and
Mm-hmm.
and then just got after it with content and getting ready for the expo coming up in Kentucky here in about a week and a half. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
do. I think it's Ardensburg is where the
Mm-hmm.
expo is gonna be. I'm gonna do a seminar out there. I was invited to go
Oh,
do a
awesome.
seminar, so kind of a last minute invite, but that's okay. So I'll put some stuff together,
We take
and
those.
right, we'll take them. So that'll be a good time.
All right. One more post. All right. And one last one. All right. Well, welcome back to the second episode of the Veganless podcast. We talk about all things hunting, always try to leave advice for new hunters. And today I will be joined with Austin here from Tactical Approach Outdoors. I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me on, man. I'm been looking forward to joining your podcast, and I know have been talking for quite a while, and finally able to get a video chat going and go from there. So, Austin Stoned, I'm the owner of Tactical Approach Outdoors. I'm from Kansas City, and for those who don't know me, my everyday job, I'm actually a personal trainer, and when it comes to Tactical Approach Outdoors, that is all about deer hunter education and habitat consulting and all things deer hunter related. Personally, if you haven't been following me, I do pretty much all of my hunting on public land, which is what I self film on YouTube. So it's been a lot of fun building this over the last few years and interacting with a whole lot of people, making a whole lot of connections and fellow hunting friends in the industry, and doing these podcasts have definitely been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were lucky to meet up. Actually, it would have been a couple weeks from a year ago at the Iowa Deer Classic last year. So kind of crazy, doesn't seem like it. But we've pretty much been talking regularly since then, like probably a couple times a week or so on, just kept in the loop and thought he'd be an awesome guest to have on because, as all you guys know, we love trying to help out new hunters. As I don't classify myself as one of the million experts out there. I always kind of keep true to just a small town Iowa guy, have, some good land to hunt between public and private, and really just kind of get the job done with limited tools. And great to kind of have someone similar. He's not one of those mega rich big farmers, game farmers. He puts in the work scouting, and I think it'd be awesome to kind of jump in and talk about some off-season plans, off-season scouting, and so on.
That sounds like a plan to me, man.
So to start off, if you were to give a new hunter one piece of advice, what would it be?
Put in the work. Don't be afraid to get after it. Get to scouting. Especially this time of year, you can't mess things up. You can't get too aggressive. Right now is really the one time of year you can do that and really get after it. And I take advantage of that personally. I get into a lot of bedding areas, really figure out what they're doing inside the sanctuaries and around the sanctuaries. That way, by the time summer scouting comes into full force, when we start to actually locate specific bucks um in those locations, then we know we're not going to mess them up. When we already know kind of how they're using it, we know the main access routes in and out, what primarily what the food source looks like, with feed trees, and if you have any primary ag or food plots in the area, what the vegetation looks like. And really, when it comes to being a new hunter, don't be afraid to mess up, because we all mess up. We're always going to continue messing up. And those are the best times to learn. I know a lot of the best seasons I've ever had have followed some of the worst seasons I've ever had. And
Yep.
it's all about your mindset going into it. Have fun and just enjoy being out there doing your thing.
With that being said, some of the seasons are kind of both of those things. They feel like the worst season ever,
Oh yeah.
but you push through with persistence and then it pays off like huge. Uh, like, I think a common misconception is kind of touching back to how Austin just said, make mistakes. What you're seeing on social media a lot is the outcome. You don't see the million empty sits or days or any of that you're out there. You just see the highlights and the outcome, as mentioned. So it is important to keep your head up, keep pushing, because it might not even be like the most ideal day, but you take the time and you put yourself out there, and your odds are increased infinitely versus sitting on the couch. At the end of the day, you can study deer, you can figure out what they do, their habits, so on, but they do have free will at the end of the day. So you can push through unfavorable, conditions and get lucky.
And one of the best things that I've started doing the last 3 to 5 years or so is using those unperfect days per se, when the conditions aren't quite right, to actually scout and try to collect more information and stay out of those locations that, rather than putting the hunting pressure in my best stand before the conditions are correct, maybe try to locate a few other areas or locate another buck or continue working and learning the area. You know, put boots on the ground, continue scouting, and use those so-called bad days to hunt and put the puzzle pieces together. Because then when we do actually get a good weather day, the conditions are right for the stand. Maybe you find out, well, I actually found a better location because I spent this hot day or this windy day scouting. I found a better tree to hunt. And then you go back on the better weather conditions and you may even fill a tag on that first sit that you do that.
Right?
And I've come across a lot of locations like that where, I didn't know a scrape was where it was, and a lot of the reasons because it shifted. So it could have
Hmm.
shifted 100 yards from where I've been hunting, and I would have never known that if I was just sitting in a tree. So I
Hmm.
got out and found the fresh sign, and then came back when the conditions were more ideal to actually hunt it and spend time hunting it. So there's different ways you can take on that, rather
Yep.
than just sitting on the couch on bad weather days. You can get out and collect
Hmm.
information even if you're not sitting in a tree stand. And that information is just as important, if not more important, than what you're going to see in the tree stand on that day.
I agree 100%. You should definitely be scouting more than you're hunting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's obviously there's a fine line to that because it is easy to overpressure your
Hmm.
area if you are continually putting boots on the ground. So there's a fine line to that, and it really depends on the property that you're hunting. If you're hunting large tracts of public that I tend to be hunting, and a lot of us have access to, honestly, the
Hmm.
majority of us deer hunters have access to, then you can get away with getting into areas that you're curious about,
Hmm.
areas that aren't pushing deer out of your primary hunting locations before that cold front hits. And maybe you get after an area that, like I said, you're curious about. So you just never know what you're going to run into. And then if you've got a smaller property, you've been managing a little bit better and more pretty much exactly what's going on property, maybe those days are best on the couch. You know what I mean? If you already know pretty much what's going on and you don't have
Hmm.
a lot of room for error because you acreage just isn't there, it's better not to put the pressure on the property unless you're trying to figure some things out.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors
There's a lot.
between how much time you hunt. Because obviously, if you work a lot and you only have a week or, X amount of days to hunt a year, you kind of have to capitalize on that. But if you have more time to hunt, you have more time to be patient and kind of implement these things. So, really, it kind of comes down to yourself, your time, and you really have to kind of sit down and figure out what exactly your strategy can afford to do.
Absolutely. And then it comes down to setting your goals going into the season
Yes.
and adjusting your goals accordingly throughout the season, depending on the situation that presents itself.
Yes, 100%. And kind of piggybacking off of that, everyone hunts for different reasons. At the end of the day, meat in the fridge is big. So you kind of have to figure out where you kind of fall in the group. And there's obviously trophy hunters, there's just straight up meat hunters, there's hybrid, mix of both. And there's nothing wrong with any of that as long as you're being ethical, you are, you know, staying safe, ethical, following the rules, and, putting in the work and getting it done. So I think you kind of need to figure out where you fall in that, especially if you're a new hunter. I don't I absolutely hate seeing you guys get caught up in the social media game. Right now, it's just big, mega giant bucks. You watch these guys that put down multiple 200 inch deer per year. And you just watch that. So then I see a lot of these guys, especially new hunters, posting in the Facebook group saying, I know this isn't the biggest, but just delete that first sentence. Be proud of what you got, because if it got you excited, absolutely take it. Now, this isn't me saying I think everyone should go after the first deer they see. I think you should set your own goals, as mentioned, and what's attainable for you based off of your time and desire and your need. So,
And that's really goes right down to the reason I actually started Tactical Approach Outdoors in the first place was because of that. You saw a lot of big TV shows that showed a very unrealistic expectation to what deer hunting for the general public actually truly is all about. And I've only ever had public land available to me. And so I'm not trying to jump on it on any kind of piggyback train or because I'm cool. It's what
mhm.
I've ever had hunted. So here I am. That's what I've got. So I started it to show more of a realistic approach and year-round approach to what hunting is all about. Instead of just putting down as big a deer as possible, as quick as possible, let's showcase the grind. Let's showcase the process that leads into it and kind of the learning curves, the mistakes, the bad seasons, when you don't
Highs and the
choose.
lows. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really the reason I started Tactical Approach Outdoors was to relate to folks just like me out there trying to get it done on imperfect locations with, imperfect time. And that's the majority of the hunting public. And that's the way we've got to make it work. And the cool part about that though is you can still put down giant bucks on purpose with
Yes.
those circumstances in place. So it's not one of those things that you don't
One
have
or the
to
other. Yeah.
yeah, you don't have to choose one or the other. You can still be successful on very mature, very large deer with circumstances given to you that are quote unquote imperfect.
Yes. Really nailing down the point earlier of putting in the work, because those deer don't grow mature by being stupid. They are smart. It's a game of chess. You kind of have to play it until, you one of you makes a mistake.
And the majority of the
Obviously,
time, you're going to
yeah.
make the mistakes
I'm,
more than
I'm
they
saying
are.
you hope they're the one that makes a mistake. So I think it really kind of breaks down into kind of two different routes. Say it's off season regardless right now,
Mhm,
but there's kind of the public off season grind,
mhm.
and then there's the private off season grind. Should we kind of take kind of a general look at what each one of those look like?
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like they parallel themselves a lot more than people give it credit for.
They do.
That it's a whole lot more similar in reality than what folks give it credit for. The only difference is that on private, you can pretty much control your what kind of food is in place, and you can control access routes possibly being put into your
Yep.
property and in place. Where on public, you have no control about that. You just got to hunt as is. So
Yep.
that's really the only thing that I would say is the biggest, which are pretty big factors, not gonna
Hmm.
lie, especially the food side of things.
Yes.
But when it comes to actually understanding what the deer are doing on property, they're exactly the same. They're paralleling themselves. And when it comes to the public land side of things, I'm l- my movement's going to be a lot more concentrated and there's going to be pockets of movement versus maybe seeing a little bit more widespread movement on private ground just because it's not hunted as hard,
Hmm.
right? And there are private grounds out there that get hunted just as hard just because there's a lot of folks that have
Yeah.
access to hunt it. So you would actually approach that private property the same as you would approach any other public property. Where are these deer staying safe around the hunting pressure that's on property? And then you can kind of start narrowing down, well, what's the reason they're there? What's the food look like? What's the wind that they're possibly bedding there and moving with, and multiple factors that kind of go into it, but you're still trying to locate the same general food, wind, movement, and hunter pressure.
Yep. Yep. So I think um, a good kind of, I guess, excuse if you need one to get your boots on the ground right now as we're coming into shed season. So I'd say shed hunt with purpose. While you're out there, be looking for signs, be paying attention to where bedding is, where signs are, where food sources are, where water is, because they all are a piece of that puzzle. Obviously, when it comes to private at this time of year, you are probably starting to do some habitat management of your own, which I'm actually getting ready to dive into that in my place currently. So I believe I've sent you a map at one point of what my like
I think you have.
parasail looks like.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's all super thick and a lot of overgrown. Eventually it'd be nice to toss a match and, let it burn
Burn it off.
through. Right. But I kind of started small this past season and I did an eighth of an acre clover food plot. I had no real equipment, a lawnmower, weed eater, leaf blower, a torch, and, just little things here and there. So we threw the plot in last year, and originally the clover kind of got beat out by grass and weeds, but I mowed it down and it won out. So that was kind of the extent of what I could do last year because I had no access. I put in a crossing, so now I can get a small tractor across. So the old hayfield that the plot is actually in, it is around an acre and a half. So my idea for this season is to expand and take up that whole hayfield. And what I want to kind of do is I want to horseshoe it, so to speak, and then in the center of it put an elevated blind, just like an octagon up there, and then probably leave the clover and the little foot of it at the bottom. And then I want to do like brassicas in one spot and then late season stuff up top. So it kind of has a diversity of crops. And that's kind of a quick rundown of mine. Um, but yeah, that's just an example of kind of differences between public and private things that you can do. And then in addition to that, access is the big kind of blocker in my property. South winds are really the only ideal winds for it currently. And Iowa hunting season, that's not predominant. So going to try to cut access paths down the sides and then one down the middle and then a plan going back to don't have big equipment. We have some thick cedars. There's two different patches on each side of like the property. They're super thick. You basically have to crawl on your hands and knees to get through them. They're way overgrown. So during shed season, we're going to take a few battery powered sawzalls and just kind of cut some footpaths back through there so you can get back to the back. So you don't necessarily have to have large equipment to make an impact. You can do it with, your basic tools and just general ambition.
Absolutely. It comes down to how bad you want
Yeah.
it. You can get it
Yep.
done with a whole lot less. That's for sure.
You can spend, I don't even know what it is to rent an excavator per day right now, but you can do that if your pockets are deep enough, or you can rummage through your toolbox and do it for a few $100s in tools and just
Absolutely.
hard work. So try not to get caught up in the excuses of, oh, I don't have this, I don't have the money. Where there, if there's a will, there's a way. It's kind of just my long-winded gist there.
Yeah, that's how I look at it when I find specific locations on public. It's funny. We'll get into a spot and we'll think, man, it's gonna be hell to get a deer out
Hmm.
of this. But if that's where they are, that's where they are. So, I got this idea that, I'll shoot him where he's at and then
Yeah.
figure it out from
And
there.
the other end of that coin is it's hard to get into. That probably means that most of the hunters aren't going to try going in there either.
Hmm.
You have to realize that if a deer is somewhere, they're there for a reason.
And then you got to figure out the why behind it.
Yes. Yes, you do.
And that really is going into what's driving my postseason scouting this year. Chasing a couple giants this past season that got away from me. One in Kentucky, one in Kansas. Two very different properties, and each of these bucks were different, pretty different personalities per se. The one in Kentucky, exact same location. I found him in May. He was there in November. Very
Hmm.
small home range, extremely thick home range, and it's a ton of thickets, a lot of food diversity in a very small area. So he didn't have to move around and leave the area very far. Where the Kansas deer I was after a lot more plains type of hunting, in
Hmm.
kind of Flint Hill type area. So you could walk 2 miles between ditches where the trees and the oaks are. And I couldn't find a single producing oak out there on this Kansas property that I was hunting. I couldn't find a single oak that was producing all year. They were predominantly bur oaks, and bur oaks, the way they produce is you either have a crop or you don't have a crop. And you may have a crop every 1 to 2 years from those bur oaks. So
Hmm.
that acorns just weren't producing this year. So which also probably added to the fact that the home range was a little bit larger.
Hmm.
So it's really made me think kind of outside the box on, okay, if he's got a small home range, it's going to be a thick, nasty area. And how in the world can I hunt him in that 30-acre thicket that he doesn't have to leave if he doesn't want to? So it's getting me kind of thinking outside the box along those lines. How can I adjust my hunting tactics to still get after this deer without busting that thicket?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Without blowing out
Yeah.
that thicket, how can I still kinda take shots at them kinda around the edges? How are
Right.
they converging movement in the center? Is there any primary movement in the center, or is it just movement? Can I
Right.
find any huge rubs, scrapes, or are all the scrapes on the edges? So I'm just keeping an open mind to it.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to that Kansas buck, where's his second and third bedding locate area? I had
Right.
one bedding area nailed, and I mean, it's a large area. It's not a
Hmm.
tiny little area. It's a big enough area that you're gonna miss him if you're not in the right tree, obviously.
Hmm.
But where's his second and possibly
And how
third
does he get there?
bedding
Yeah.
location, and how does he get there? What's his primary route of movement? Is he staying in the open more, or is he staying in the trees? How's this deer moving? Also, a big difference is that Kentucky buck was always running with at least one other
Hmm.
buck the whole year. And that Kansas deer, not a single time was he running with a different deer, always alone. So, what's the deal? Are you extremely aggressive? Are you a little bit more of a recluse? Like what's learning each of their different personalities and
Yep.
totally different areas has really kind of led to me thinking outside the box on figuring out multiple different locations and how I can kind of follow him in
Hmm.
his circle per se. You know what I mean? If I got this one, okay, I got this one kind of figured out on conditions. What's the next one? What's that look like? And then possibly the next one look like? And I can move and just kind of follow him around and be very precise on
Hmm.
those hunts, and I can kind of stay in the game no matter what the conditions are. So that's kind of got me really thinking outside the box on how I'm approaching my postseason scouting this year because of those two different deer I was following.
Right. What would you say your biggest tools in your toolbox are for your postseason scouting?
Biggest tools?
Yeah, like are you using cameras? Do you have mapping apps? Kind of what's your go-tos?
Onyx, honestly. So when it comes to postseason, I'm it's boots and Onyx and just
Hmm.
just hours and miles in the woods. I want to map out the whole property. That entire area that I'm finding. Once I find a key location that I have increased movement and increased sign, that's when I'm going to slow down and I'm going to just tear it apart.
Start studying that area more.
Study it.
Yep.
Because the more waypoints you start to make, especially on key features, they'll eventually start to give you some kind of pattern and some
Hmm.
kind of rhyme or reason to the movement. And what you'll eventually find out is you're going to lose the sign and
Hmm.
then it'll pick up again. Okay, what's the reason I lost the sign? And then you dive into, okay, well, this is easier to access as a hunter. It's a little bit easier to hunt too. There's more trees available. It's oh, I found a blind. You know what I mean? You just kind of slow down and pay attention to it. And then once the sign picks up again, what's the reason that the sign picked up again? And you look for feed trees, mark all the scrapes, all the rubs, access routes in and out, and you just kind of look at the direction of travel. And then you can start piecing together possible hunts from that. And
Hmm.
the if I could map it out right now, once I go into actually locating deer, and if I locate a deer that I want to pursue in that specific area, I have a general idea of how he might be using that area just because I have the whole darn thing pretty much mapped out already. And then
Right.
that way I don't have to dive into those areas when he's there and then possibly blow him out and run the hunt altogether.
There we go. Robbie says hard work always pays off. Money helps, but it is not the most important thing. Agree.
100%. 100%.
Hard work is key. If you have a guy that has tons of drive and then have a guy that's lazy with money, the guy with drive is going to beat the other one 100% of the time.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So, so kind of stepping back a bit, where you mentioned that a big reason you started was showing the highs and the lows and so on of a true hunter or your normal man. How do you go about showing the lows on as a YouTuber myself? I got skunked shotgun season. So trying to put that together but still be interesting is a whole challenge of its own. How do you approach it? Just trying to tell your story or
That's really what I'm doing. I'm telling my story and I'm showing my process. Because if I'm getting my butt kicked, typically I'm putting boots on the ground and I'm
Mhm.
trying to kind
Figuring
of
out
look
why.
around and I'm trying to figure out why.
Mhm.
So I'll try to showcase what my process is, even though season is really tough. And during that
Mhm.
video while I'm scouting, I'll kind of explain the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So it's like, hey,
Yep.
this for whatever reason, this is what's happening in this area that I've been hunting.
Mhm.
These are the struggles I've been having. I'm gonna adjust and try to figure out a way around it and figure out how if I can make an adjustment. Maybe I
Mhm.
had hunting pressure move in. Maybe I had a wind swirl that I had
Mhm.
no idea was there, and I'm getting busted. And I need to figure out what the wind is doing in that location so I can adjust my tree stand accordingly
So
and
kind
go
of
from
turning
there.
into an educational outlook of,
Yeah.
hey, we're learning together right now. Like,
Mhm.
let's figure this out. Yeah, that makes
Absolutely.
sense
Yeah.
because it's full of content of successes. So, as a YouTuber, just content creator in general, showing your losses or fails is kind of a vulnerable thing. So, just kind of interesting seeing how you approach it and how it works for you. So,
Yeah, and I like to build the season, throughout the whole
mhm,
year. I don't just wanna kinda have, well, this is this hunt, and if it's successful, it's successful. If it's not, it's not.
right.
Each hunt, each video kind of builds on itself,
Mhm,
even if it's in a different state. A lot of times, I'll actually all the time, I'll take what I learned in a different state and apply it
mhm,
to this state because maybe, hey, I'm finding some parallels.
right.
Maybe I'm having issues in this state, but I figured something else over here. So I
Mhm,
figured something out. So I'm going to take what I figured out and I'm going to test it. I'm going to experiment a little
mhm,
bit and see if it parallels. Because if it parallels, I'm in the game. I already have a system set up because I learned it in this other state. So
right.
so I like to build on each video and just kind of showcase the whole process.
Mhm, yep.
Where as a viewer, you can't just sit down and watch a 6 to 15-minute video and see that
Mhm,
entire process, but,
right.
if you saw the successful hunt and you're
Mhm,
into it and you're interested, you can go back and
mhm,
kinda see the whole year leading into
yeah.
that
Kind
successful
of an
hunt.
educational experience to
Yeah,
build upon. Yeah, that makes a lot
absolutely.
of
Yeah.
sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of another point too. You do a lot of traveling. You hunt in different states and such. Do you have a method of how you choose where you want to hunt? I know you're trying to do some of the whitetail slams and such. So, yeah,
Yeah.
how do you determine where you want to go? And
So when it comes to states I choose, the whitetail slam I trying to work on. I started the pursuit last year, wasn't able to go through with it like I hoped during the deer season, and
hmm
that comes back down to being a realistic person because sometimes life just happens and you have to shift your priorities as such. So, we all deal with it, and it's just part of the deal sometimes. So that will dictate a little bit about which state I choose. And moving forward, I have set it as kind of a challenge for myself to keep choosing different states, especially after I'm successful in that state and keep
hmm
moving forward. So, um, and when it comes to actually finding a specific property in that
hmm
state, I am I have so many properties marked up on Onyx. I spend
hmm
hours and hours and hours. Yeah, I'm sure I have states marked up that I'll never probably.
right.
So
E
it's just it
Scout.
eScout. So I find properties that might have tricky regulations that could
hmm
possibly, one, maybe keep hunting pressure down, but don't
hmm
don't bank on it because other people are thinking the same thing. And that's something that as a public land hunter, you just have to get out of the thinking that you're going to get away from pressure. You're not going to,
hmm
no matter where you go, Iowa included. So you're just not going to. So now, how can we figure out where these bucks are still living? And I want to now find a property. Well, maybe because these certain regulations are in place, deer are surviving and starting to reach that older age class. And if a buck can reach, I forget the exact percentage, the net number here right off the top of my head, but if a buck can reach 2.5 years old, and especially 3.5, the chances of him reaching 5.5 dramatically increase. They
Yep.
skyrocket. So if deer are not really getting harvested at in mass numbers off of that property, they're allowed to survive and get to an older age class, you're going to run into bigger deer. It's just going to happen. And maybe that 5.5 is 130, maybe that 5.5 is 160. You just
Yep.
don't know at that point. There's too many factors that go into antler growth.
Yeah, there really
And
are.
so I'm looking for funky regulations and I'm looking for diversity. because typically, if a property has a lot of diversity, it's pretty huntable and you can kind of figure out what the deer are doing. But also, typically, the deer are going to be on property and they're going to use it more during the day.
Mhm.
So you just kind of got to play around with it and see if there's, possibly some access that can be difficult. Maybe it's a really steep property to hunt.
Mhm.
I got out of the thinking that I'm possibly going to walk further than anybody else because that's not going to happen anymore.
Not
That
anymore.
not anymore. That
Especially with people
Yeah,
like the hunting public, they really like honestly did good things by getting more
yeah.
people into hunting, but I want to say that's a big influence to a lot of the modern day public hunters starting to push more because they got the idea that okay, like if I go farther, no one's going to be there.
And another thing is equipment's lighter than it's ever been. You're
Yes,
not
and
you're not
e-bikes.
you're not hauling around. Yeah, where you can use them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not hauling around a 30-pound tree stand anymore as your mobile setup. You're hauling
Hmm.
around a 6 to 10 pound
Yeah,
tree stand
three or
or a
four
saddle.
sticks. Yeah.
Yeah, or a saddle. So
Yep.
the understanding of that is definitely a lot greater now than it used
Hmm.
to be, which is great. I love seeing it. I love seeing the success, but it does make it more difficult from someone who that's usually where I used to find deer, and now I'm not
Hmm.
finding deer there because of the pressure. So now you just got to think outside the
Hmm.
box a little bit and get creative and really just kind of pay attention to what the deer are telling you,
Hmm.
because they'll tell you where they're at if you listen,
Hmm.
really pay attention.
Now, during like later season
Hmm.
or later postseason, rather, have you utilized mock scrapes and cameras like a decent bit?
I like using cameras a lot where I can. Like
Yeah.
wherever it's legal, I like using cameras, and not for the sense of that I'm purposefully trying to hunt a specific buck, or
Yeah.
I'm purposefully trying to live off of the camera intel that's given me, because there's too many holes that come
Yeah.
with trail camera intel. But you can also learn a lot from trail
Yes.
camera intel. You can understand behavior in the woods that you wouldn't see because you're not in all those locations. And then two, I can
Yeah.
also see, um, is this property producing the caliber of deer that I want to pursue
Mhm. It's
personally
good for inventorying.
as my personal goals? Is there a deer that I want,
Mhm.
multiple deer that I want to pursue, or the caliber of buck
Mhm.
there? And that could tell me, if there's not, then typically I won't find sign if there's not that caliber of buck.
Mhm.
But sometimes the caliber of buck's there, but there's not much sign. And that I'm still trying to figure out that whole thing. But
Mhm.
I've got my ideas and it really narrows down to hunting pressure, because I've also found a lot of hunting pressure on those areas. It's just
Mhm.
those deer have found a way to survive on those properties, and
Yep.
they're sticking around. So, yeah, I love using cameras where I can and where they're legal, and then I take what I learned during the postseason,
Mhm.
mapping wise, and you use your woodsmanship and make sure you're staying on the fresh sign and you're hunting proper conditions for that same
Mhm.
location.
Right. So I have more of a fun question now. So this one's for all of my haters on TikTok, right? So I live in Iowa, and the comments I get are, "You live in Iowa, man. You don't know anything about hunting. Try coming to X state." So you've hunted in Iowa. Can you just walk and pick any tree in the woods and then just have a 200-inch deer or some giant walk underneath you? Is it that easy?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I came out of that hunt, because I hunted it in 21. That was the year that I hunted it. I shot a really big bodied 130-inch 8 point.
Hmm.
I mean, that's, you think when you come to
Awesome
Iowa,
deer,
like,
though.
oh, awesome deer, real wide and heavy, just a
Hmm.
fantastic buck. And, um, but I wasn't necessarily going to hold out for a 160,
Right.
and that
Especially limited time.
a limited time, and there is a fair amount of hunting pressure that I
Mhm.
found. I found multiple public properties that were barren of sign,
Hammered
not
too,
I
and then
barren,
yeah.
and but I also found a lot of boot tracks.
Mhm.
There's a reason for it, so you hunt it the same. There's so many parallels no matter what state you're in. Deer are deer. So, especially mature deer are mature deer. And if they reach 5.5, whether they're a 170 or they're a 120, who really cares? They're 5.5
Yep.
mature buck. And then you just figure out, what are they, how are they using the property? How are they using the terrain in that specific area? How are they using the vegetation? What are they eating? And there's a whole lot more parallels no matter what state you're hunting than most people give it credit for.
Mhm.
I do think that that is funny because hear it a lot too, is, where you just this state is so different than any other
Yeah,
state.
they do
You
the
just
same
it's
thing with
hard.
turkey hunting.
Yeah. It's the hardest state to hunt in the whole country. Well, I hear that about pretty much every state. So I don't that's not true.
Mhm.
Honestly, you just get
Yeah.
to work it. Deer are deer. Find what they're doing in that specific area and figure out what the maturity looks like. That way you can set a
Yep.
realistic expectation. Because, Iowa bucks are going to be very different than Alabama bucks.
Mhm, or
They're a
Florida
different,
for that matter.
or Florida. They're a different subspecies of deer, and
Mhm.
they have the ability to grow a much larger rack
We
than
have
those Florida and Alabama
tons of
deer.
ag. Yeah,
Yeah.
tons of ag.
So
So,
so you're gonna have a significant you're gonna have a larger number of large
yes.
bucks, but what does that mature buck look like in Florida?
Again, they only
Yeah,
get mature because they're smart.
yep, and they've reached a certain age class.
Yes.
So, I've got some buddies too that are from, real southern states, Florida,
Mhm.
and sent me some trail camera pictures, of like a 6 point. And I'm like, dude, that 6 point's a stud.
Yeah,
Like
they're out there.
that's a 6.5-year-old freaking chocolate horn. I mean, just a
Mhm.
wild swamp buck. I'm
Mhm.
like I would be just as excited to
Oh,
put an
yeah.
arrow in that
Oh,
deer as
yeah.
any other deer
Just
that
the
I've shot.
experience.
Yeah,
It's, like, absolutely
absolutely.
wild. So, yeah, I thought that'd be a fun question because I always get them on the most random videos. It'll be something non-related to where I'm even from, and someone will be like, "Oh, yeah? Well, I'm from the mountains, man. You couldn't even get a whitetail here. Come try it, man. Come try it." It's like, dude,
It's
like,
just different. It's just different.
I think it's just a cop out. Like, they just feel like they need validation for a few seconds. It's like, man, I don't care where you're from. Just
Yeah,
go bag a nice deer. Something that gets you excited.
yeah,
I'll be the first
absolutely,
one to tell you congrats. Like, I'm
absolutely.
very supportive of my fellow ethical and legal hunters. You cross that line, though, not so much. So, do you have any big hunts this year that you're planning for?
Well, I'm gonna keep pursuing that buck in Kansas for sure. I know
Hmm.
he made it. The one in Kentucky didn't make it, unfortunately. I got proof of that. But
Hmm.
um aside from that, man, I can't really say I have any really big hunts
Hmm.
on the board. I'm gonna try to pursue the states that I wanted to pursue last year for
Hmm.
the, I've now calculating in about 2 years of scouting now into
Hmm.
those areas, and honestly, I'm pretty determined to shoot an opening week buck in Kentucky. I'm
Hmm.
kinda determined to do that. That is an extremely difficult time of year to hunt, and we've been
Hmm.
after it. I think we've only made 2 trips out there to hunt, throughout the
Hmm.
years, and, um, we've been on deer, we just haven't been able to connect. So
Hmm.
I'm kinda excited to try to really make that happen.
Hmm.
So, and I learned a lot last year from that deer. So I've got some ideas moving
Hmm.
into this season, and I think I'm going to really try to give that a go to see if I can connect on on a buck that early. And
There's a lot of
it,
people that won't even hunt beginning of season.
oh yeah,
That's when I got my buck this year. I got it opening day.
hmm
I don't know if you remember that, but
yeah, you
yeah,
did.
it was
Hmm.
literally it was 90 some degrees October 1st opening day. A lot of people wouldn't even touch the woods because like, oh man, it's too hot. Well, guess what? Deer are gonna be deer. They don't like they still have to function. Like they're there.
Yeah,
Plus, as mentioned, south winds. If I get south winds, I'm gonna hunt because that's my best access. So
hmm,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
So Iowa hunt again coming, right?
I'm
Down the
working on my
down the
preference
road.
points. Yeah, I'm working on
That's
my
right.
preference. So after this year, I think I'll have 3 preference points in the bag.
Okay.
And when I drew in 21, I drew with 3.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna get the preference point this year, and next year possibly put into the draw and just and see if I can't pull that tag again with 3, and if I can't, I'll pull it with 4.
Yeah, you
So,
should also consider holding out for Zone 5 for the collab no one knew they needed. The veganless and tactical approach.
right? That'd be a fun hunt.
Yes. And I started building points for a Wyoming elk hunt this year. That'll probably be a 7-year draw, but that is
Mhm.
just high on the bucket list. That's a dream hunt.
That'd be a good time.
And sometime between now and then, probably try doing a Colorado over the counter to go out there and just learn learn how it's done and
Yep.
hope for something. But in the near future and more attainable, I've been thinking I kind of want to do a over the counter South Dakota mule deer hunt.
Oh, there you go.
That seems like a blast. I think it's like a $300 tag or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
not
I've
pocket change, but not much compared to a lot of out of state stuff.
yeah, it's not $500.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've whitetail hunted South Dakota for
Hmm.
quite a few years, and actually that was my very first out of state hunt
Hmm.
was South Dakota, and out of state buck was South Dakota. So that I definitely have some experience
Hmm.
up there. I hadn't gone as far west as you need to go for muleys though.
Yeah.
So I hadn't ventured out that far, but I do like South Dakota. It's been a fun state
Hmm.
for us to hunt.
I also want to go up there pheasant hunting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're much into pheasant hunting, but I did that a lot growing up with my stepdad. We had dogs, and I haven't really announced it yet. So I guess teaser guys picked up a chocolate lab puppy that I'm training to be a pheasant dog. So be ready for some content there.
There you go.
I
That's fun.
absolutely love it though. It's great exercise and just getting out, and it's an experience that if you haven't done it, you should definitely give it a go.
Yeah, I would enjoy it. I spend so much time deer hunting. I haven't ventured into bird hunting very much, but I
Yeah,
know that that'd be a whole lot of fun to experience.
yeah. I didn't get to go out nearly as much as I would hoped for because I was busy with deer. I hunted normal season. Obviously, that checked out pretty quick opening day. Then I also am hunting urban season. So essentially, like, I'm hunting a cemetery with probably like a 3 to 5 acre at most forest. So it's real tight. You have kind of limited room for errors. And that's another type of hunting actually that people just try to bag on because they're like, "Oh, those are city deer, man. Like they'll let you walk up and pet them." Well, I get some of the stereotype, but deer are still deer. They live for a reason. So that was a fun battle. I just honestly didn't get out enough. I had switched jobs, was super busy and such. So I need to this upcoming season. 3 does gets you a chance to get a buck tag the following year. 5 guarantees it or strongly gets it. So
Mhm.
then you get to hunt one of those elusive urban bucks. So working on that. And then I also went shotgun season, which turned into an absolute mess for me. I I'm not a pusher. I took part in like one or two deer drives when I was a kid. And man, it's not for me, like not taken away from anyone that does it, but I just I don't enjoy it. I'll go sit out under a tree or, sit in the saddle or any of that. That's a lot more peaceful, safe, and enjoyable for me. So I'd kind of touched on this last episode, but for your sake, opening day, I had a pretty decent buck kind of skirt around me. And like, okay, like he moved pretty quick. We couldn't even really get on film. I didn't have a shot or anything at him. So I'm like, I know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to go up and he's going to bed in the ditch up here. And gave it an hour, didn't see anything else. I'm like, all right, let's go on foot because I had my buddy with me. I'm like, here, follow me. Let's see what we can do. Creep up. Long story short, he ends up being on the wrong side of the ditch for the wind. Did not expect him there, and he was like 40 yards closer than anticipated. So I bumped him. And then, complete user mistake. I had just picked up a 350 Legend and sighted it in, and my scope was on, I think it was like 12 times instead of four. So I couldn't even get his body in frame. And it was just a mess. I'm always keeping it ethical, so I didn't pop a shot. I guarantee a lot of people would, but I didn't. I let him walk, and then I tried looping around because I had an idea of where he would go on the property, and bumped like four does, and then didn't end up running into him. He was gone, so I end up toughing it out the week and hunt. No luck, not seeing anything because it was shotgun two that I went. So they already had all the pressure of shotgun one. And shotgun season in Iowa is by far the busiest season. Like everyone's out there all doing drives, so on. And, their pattern just went out the window. They used to kind of come up the ditch, up the trail, through the plot, out into the ag fields, but they were just pouring straight onto the neighbors. Like I I couldn't do anything. Just watch them walk down the neighbor's property. So I ended up saying, I'm going to go hunt public. There's, a ton of public land in southern Iowa. And we literally walked 7, 8+ miles and didn't see a single deer, a single one. And then when we're walking back to the truck, we saw a yearling doe cross right in front of the truck. That's literally all we saw. So it was defeat. The signs were there, deer just were not there.
Yep.
But we went to readjust and check out like a spot kind of wrapped around from where we're hunting on the public, and it's a mud road. But the mud road was literally compact from all the trucks that had driven on it. It looked like concrete. So like the
Yeah.
pressure was real there during shotgun season.
Pushed off
So
on a
yeah,
private.
what's that?
They got pushed off on a private.
Yeah, they did absolutely, absolutely. And Megan, what has been both of your favorite hunts, regardless of the game?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'll let you go first.
Probably, I probably got to go back to that Iowa hunt, and the reason for that one was because of the adventure of it. I'm a very adventure guy. I like doing cool stuff. It's just
Go
it's
watch that video if you haven't. It's pretty phenomenal.
it was a cool hunt. So I canoed in a mile, set camp, and I would canoe back and forth up and down the stream a mile and a half from where I was hunting back to camp. So I didn't see my truck for 5 days. So everything I took with me was in my canoe, hunting gear included. And we had scouted this property, postseason scouted this property during the spring. So we already kind of had an idea about what was going on. I just had to find what was fresh. And then, it was kind of a mid-October time. So if the scrapes were open, you can pretty much bet that they're using them pretty actively because the scrapes just weren't widespread yet. So, back and forth, mile and a half every day. Ended up seeing on the first day I got there, I bumped a really nice deer. I don't know if it was the deer that I ended up seeing on day two or the deer I ended up shooting. he easily could have been either one of those bucks, but I ended up setting up not far from that and had an encounter with a really big deer on day 2. I think he was a younger deer for sure, just kinda looking at his body, mannerisms, and, um, how his antlers were formed, but he was a stud. I woulda gladly have shot that deer, but, um, held out, and then the morning of day 5, I get out there, frosty morning, the paddle was frosted over, the fog on the river was thick. It was just really cool getting out to the stand and, ended up shooting him on, at first light there on day 5. And, during the morning paddles, getting out there at 4 in the morning on the river, you could see trout darting in front of you of your headlamp. Your headlamp would scan the water, you'd trout darting across in the light. The beaver were slapping their tails on the rubber 'cause they were not happy about me being there. You'd see deer kinda, along the bank, of the river. You just see
The glowing eyes.
their glowing eyes, and then, I'd be sitting in the tree about 30 minutes prior to sunlight, and you would hear the deer crossing the river. So it made the overall experience of that hunt was so cool. And, I will definitely say that's probably my favorite hunt. I mean, there's each hunt for me has its remembrances for different reasons. Me and my brother have shared some really cool hunts in the past, and I've experienced some cool stuff. But the overall adventure of that hunt was something I hadn't experienced before. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that watching the video of that, it was just phenomenal. Honestly, I think morning hunts in general, they might not always end up being the most productive for me harvest wise, but they're by far the coolest hunts. Just listening to the world wake up is just, it feels good for the soul.
Absolutely,
So, man, I don't know if I can pick a favorite hunt. Honestly, I think it's my next hunt
that's a
because,
good
like,
answer.
they're all good.
Yeah.
Like, even if you fail, they're good. I would rather be out in the woods disconnecting from the crazy world we live in today than you know, living in it. Like
Hmm.
it's a great release for me. I get out there and I just feel like, I belong there. It's easy to get caught up in stress and anxiety and work and you name it. But you step into the woods, even my urban hunting, like miles from my house or less, and town still. Just being in the tree in the woods, it's phenomenal. It is just rewarding and feels great. But if I were to have to pick a hunt, I don't know. Like sentimental value, obviously, like this opening day hunt. Um, I had always hunted mainly shotgun and stuff. I was mainly a meat hunter growing up, and that's still the underlying purpose. I want to fill the freezer, but I decided to pick up archery again. I had shot archery minimal when I was younger. I bow fished a little bit and I went out into the woods a few times deer hunting, but never really put in the time or got one with a bow. So this season was the first season I picked up a bow. I picked one up last spring and then just shot at minimum once a week and tried turkey season. That was a learning experience. I had never turkey hunted. I only had time in late season, so it was pretty pressured by then. And being inexperienced, I ended up not tagging out. I had an opportunity to, but it was a bearded hen, and I felt bad taking a hen during nesting season, so I just let it go. So coming into opening day, I had been working my butt off on the land all year. And I think that's what makes this hunt special is this land has been in our family since the 40s. And I had hunted it growing up and then hadn't touched it. this past year, I really started honing in around now last year and put in all this just blood, sweat, and tears with nothing really, just absolute minimal. Worked our butts off. And opening day comes around. Everyone's like, dude, why are you even hunting? It's 90 some degrees in Iowa, October 1st. And I'm like, man, I have an opportunity to hunt. I'm going to hunt. And I want to say it fell on a Sunday. So I had to go back to work the next day. I had the one day to hunt and I drove down there for it. It's a couple hours away. And morning, I saw one doe, but it was just cool seeing stuff utilize your hard work, like out there eating the clover. And then I go grab lunch, come back out, and I'm sitting there, it's getting to that last hour, hour and a half, and all of a sudden 10 does just spill out into my plot. I'm like, dude, this is cool. Like, I planted that down there. Like, I set the stand, I put in that water trough, I did this, I did that. Like, this is my hard work, myself and my buddy. And like, I have this like 4 point come behind me, and like I'm watching him, and then I have this small buck come in front of me, and I'm just watching all this just life out here, and it's just fulfilling. And then, it's coming up on last light, and my buck I see come out, and I'm like, holy cow, dude. Like, he, so I had this target buck and I had this buck, and they're very similar, like framed. The target buck was just wider, and he kept giving these different angles, and I'm like, is that him? Is it not? Which one of those two is it? And I'm like, Daniel, you're dumb. You are excited as hell right now. Get him. So I go to grab my bow, and all those does, one of them bust me, and they all, including him, run off. I'm like, shit, dude. I just hesitated and lost that, but he stopped right at the entrance. There's the trail that comes in, and he just looked around for like 15 minutes. Then he walks out, and I'm like, this was meant to be. So I took him. Although tragic, for some reason, my camera, it was blinking saying it was recording this entire time, but it apparently ran out of storage. It said that it had plenty of time left. It ran out of storage. And it was recording to internal storage for some reason. So it runs out of storage, but it's blinking, and I do my due diligence. Like, I position it, it's perfect. The shot's perfectly framed. Then I flip it around. I do this post shot interview, and then I go to play back the shot because for some reason with me, every time I've harvested a deer this year, immediately like the overthinking's like, did I shoot that too far back? Like, was that a good shot? And every time it's panned out and been like a perfect shot. But at that point, I'm like, shit, where's my footage? Because it just stopped. So lost that little portion, but I would say that's definitely probably, if I had to pick one of my most rewarding, because that was my first bow buck, my first bow season, my first season working on, the farm. So there's just so many things. And then for it to pay off day one of like opening day was just crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's a cool story.
So I guess we're probably kind of getting up to our time here. But do you have any closing remarks, any fun hunts that you're looking forward to, or advice, or any of that to close out? Kind of give you this moment also to self plug.
Yeah, so this year I'm just gonna keep getting after it like I was planning on last year. Gonna take the intel that I did gather last year and try to, you know, capitalize on that this coming year. Um, we got some I'm on some big deer, so I'm really excited to see what this year brings, and would love to hunt Illinois for the first time. That one I wasn't able to get to last year, so I'm really excited actually to try to get into that state. And but of course we got Kansas and Kentucky for sure going down this year. And um if you're interested in watching these hunts and seeing how this year plays out, and um looking for some educational content, my YouTube is Tactical Approach Outdoors, and all of my other social media is the same, Tactical Approach Outdoors, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And I stay pretty active on all of those, and love listening, seeing the comments and interacting with all of my viewers and whatnot. And send me a message if you have questions about anything. And you could also find us at tacticalapproachoutdoors.com. That's actually our official website. So if you are interested in those services and any other merch or anything like that, that's where you can find it. So other than that, looking forward to seeing how this year goes. I hope everybody else sees a lot of success this year. This is probably my favorite time of year. Of course, deer season is number one. It's hard to beat that, but postseason scouting time of year is definitely one of my favorites. It's fun putting the puzzle together.
Have you been out yet? Have you found any sheds yet?
I am probably the worst shed hunter in the world.
Yeah.
And I am
I'll
I
challenge you
am
to that.
I am miserable at it. I will cover 100+ miles in a spring and I won't find a single freaking shed. But at the same time,
You're
I
getting the
find
intel too.
I'm gathering intel a lot more than I'm looking for sheds, if
Mhm.
I would be honest. I probably walk by so many sheds. I know I probably do. And because I'm looking for other stuff. So,
Mhm.
it's just the way I am. I'm probably the worst shed hunter in the world, but I like finding them when they still have them on their head at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I would rather meet them that way.
yeah, so Kentucky, that I just went to Kentucky to do some scouting this past weekend.
Mhm.
So that video, I'll be getting that video edited, and actually next week I should have that video live. So I found some really good stuff during that trip.
Awesome.
So I'm pretty excited about what I found.
Will I be seeing you at the Deer Classic in Iowa again this year?
Yes, yes, I'll be there.
All
I
right.
don't I wasn't able to get a booth this year, but we will definitely be there and networking and talking
Yep.
to everybody just like we did last year.
I'm doing the same this year. I ended up opting out for a booth, and
Okay,
I'm going to shoot the archery competitions, and then I'm going to wander around and network and hanging out with the
fa-
friends.
fantastic. We'll have to meet up with you. I've got a consulting client on Sunday, so I'll be
Awesome.
there
That's what we
Friday
like to
and
hear.
probably first half of the day Saturday, and then we'll go home.
Yeah, I think I'll be
Yeah,
there
so
the whole time.
yeah,
So
sweet
if
man.
anyone's there, feel free to stop me and say hello.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for being on here. And thank all of you for tuning into the second episode. Be sure to let us know what you think, drop comments. I'll keep an eye on it. I reply to everything. So thank you. Peace out.